Hey everyone, and we are back again with another maintenance hours. So we're on maintenance episode, I would say. So last week we had uh, James from E18E. We heard like how E18E is changing the ecosystem or supporting the ecosystem, and then Artem also talked about MSW. So today we have Matish, who lives in one of my favorite countries, Poland, and because I've been to Warsaw and Krakow, I love both the cities, by the way. Uh, and we will be talking about, or so Matesh will be sharing about like the project he has been working on and the updates on the same project. If you don't know Matesh, like he has been like contributing to TypeScript for a long time and has been managing or maintaining a lot of open source projects as well. So over to you, Matesh. Like, would you like to introduce yourself and give people like introduction about what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Mateusz. I'm a open source contributor, like you said. I maintained over the years like Redux Saga, Xstate, Emotion, um, change sets, and I'm also contributing to TypeScript a bunch. Um, yeah, and recently I was working mostly on change sets. We got like two excellent contributors that helped me drive this effort.
Mhm. Oh, yeah. So today, so Matish, let's talk about like the project you have been maintaining, and as you mentioned, chain sets. Like that's a one project where you are mostly focused on right now. So tell us about more about the project and what's coming.
Yeah, so change sets is kind of popular, I think, at the moment, which sometimes like surprises me. I remember when like I started like contributing to it when it had like I don't know 1K stars, maybe even less, and we just used it in the emotion repository actually. So like I wanted to make some changes that we kind of needed there, so I started contributing. And it was like a new tool, kind of. Also created by a co-maintainer of Emotion, and of course by some other folks at the time at Atlassian and ThinkMill. Uh, but yeah, so I got involved in the project, uh, and it always surprises me like how popular it got over like beneath my feet in a sense. Like like I have never noticed until some point that like hey, it's actually used here and there and there by very popular repositories, and the project is used for like monorepo versioning. It tries to automate things as much as possible, and just like moving the publishing process and the changelog generation to the CI, which I think is like a great idea. I always like that there is at least like in the old days there was a bunch of friction around this whole process, and not all maintainers were always like at least like from the core team added to the team on npm and so on. So like this just allowed us to move faster, and also just like document changes better, because the project forces you, which some people don't like, but like it forces you to add extra files to your project, like in your PRs, uh, in which like you document, what has changed actually, like, but like from the user perspective, because those that content goes kind of directly into the changelog MD, and I think this is like much better approach than like for example semantic comments. Like I don't like I just never liked them, like picking up the tags and just not often being sure like what's the correct way to release a major, what's the correct, like what will be the outcome of any tag, and also just like super brief comments, like content in the comments that were often like just focused on the changes, like code changes in a sense, like internal and interesting to the contributors, but not necessarily to the users. So this like introduces an explicit kind of split between the two, where the commit can be, whatever, because like every project um, is different and every project will just approach this differently. And as much as I like love detailed commits and detailed PR descriptions. Like I always look to the people like Andrew Clark from the React team, like his commits are just like from another level um in my eyes. But like, oftentimes, especially in those smaller projects, community driven, like you just don't have time to care as much in a sense. Mm, and like that extra nudge to create a user friendly content is actually like just it was, yeah, like a nudge, like a good nudge to do it and not forget it and so on. um as I said, it's used by a bunch of projects, and nowadays we have some competitors probably recently arise, as in like some new tools in the space. Uh, I I can um, definitely the project has been stagnated for some time, uh, like change sets. I mean, because well, I didn't have as much time for it. Honestly, I just prefer to spend time on some other stuff, like for example, contributing to TypeScript. And a bunch of issues were just like open for a long time. But yeah, like recently the situation got better. As I said, we got a team of contributors now, and we are working on pushing that next V3 release, and just like bring the project to the like parity with some of the improvements, like stage publishing, which is like highly requested by some, which isn't yet implemented, but it's going to be. Maybe not for the initial V3 release, but I already have a PR open. Just gotta like massage that half AI generated slop-ish code. Um, so yeah.
So, as you said, like now you are working on 3.0 release. So, uh, and like what is changing in V3 where you are more focused on right now?
Yeah, so a bunch of the effort just went into like making the library smaller, modernizing it, using like modern alternatives to some of the packages that we were using, and like we I didn't feel like just updating them or like swapping them in V2,
Mhm.
because they sometimes also have like different node requirements that we had. I mean, it wasn't at some moment, it wasn't like fully specified, but I had that like responsibility put on myself, that like we shouldn't break things, even though like like V2 was released, I don't know, like 6 years ago or
Oh,
something,
wow.
maybe. So it was around for a long time, and like even though some of the node releases already are not like supported, that were supported back then, um, we really just I didn't feel like breaking them just because they are not no longer maintained officially. Uh, because it's not like what the users expect, I feel, if somebody is still stuck on them. So yeah, like we had to do it in the new major, and once we got to it, like it was also just a good opportunity to make a bunch of improvements, changes, and so on. So we worked on improving the CLI output, at least like for the most commonly used commands, like publish and add, which are just the most basic ones for the tool. Uh, make it more like interactive and so on. Mm, we I made sure we like support the publishing tools better now. Uh, in Originally, it was just npm. Like pnpm probably wasn't even as popular as it is today
Mhm.
when the project started. So it was basic like npm or maybe yarn at the time, but yarn even wasn't even like used for publishing because it was mostly just like I
Yeah.
mean like yarn v1, the classic, because it was mostly just like compatible with npm, so it didn't like we didn't even have to like actually like invoke yarn, and everything was just delegated to npm. But like with the rise of like custom protocols like workspace and catalog and so on, it's just it's just not possible to use npm for all of those because npm just still lacks support for those. And of course, just like each package manager might have its own quirks um, around like how they resolve registries for scoped packages and so on.
Mhm.
So we really have to delegate to the like host package manager, and that is a big thing that we are like improving. mm, yeah, that's going to be improved. As I said, like we are working on the staged publishing, revamping the publishing like pipeline on the ci. Originally you had just like a single action that was like dual purpose in a sense, because it like checked if you have the changed files on disk. If there were any, then it meant okay, like we need to update the versioning pr, so it opened a pr that you could like land to trigger the release, because it removed all of those like MD files,
Mhm.
generated change logs from them, and just like committed updated versions. And then like another run on the new commit like would pick it up and was like, okay, hey, we see new versions that were just not published to the registry, so let's publish them. But and this worked nicely. But it had some challenges around like more involved setups, and especially around like some of the mm, recent or like most more often recently uh, performed attacks on the open source community,
Mhm.
uh, that
Mhm.
that we had to like take that security concern more into like core and like think from that perspective. So even yes, at times maybe like sacrificing some of the like simplicity of the like simplest workflow uh, for just a more robust one. So for example, in the new version, you will have like an option to create, and we are already using it in our own repositories. You will have an option to create a workflow which like select, it has like a job that selects the mode, then creates a handoff to the next one that either creates the version, or to the second one that publishes or maybe even pack your packages. So you can even create a pipeline that just like branches, and one branch might be like, select mode, then tag, then publish. But why this is even happening and why we like invested in that. um, well, GitHub action permissions are not very flexible, so you can't really like split permissions across steps within a single job. It's all job level or like token
Yeah.
level, but like usually you just have a single set of permissions per token that is like accessible to the whole job, and you just don't want to generate a bunch of different tokens within a single job. It's like doable, but perhaps a little bit quirky. Um, and you would have to do it in a custom way. Whereas, like if you configure permissions on the job, you just get a token from GitHub with those permissions. And of course, as long as you are like using the um, the public repositories of public packages and so on is like totally sufficient for your needs. So yeah, thanks to that split, you can, like, for example, not share the OIDC token used for publishing for those for those non-publishing steps. So if anything would be actually like compromised in that pipeline, or like selects mode, or like packs or whatever, it couldn't like steal your token because it wouldn't have one. Uh,
Mm.
because yeah, GitHub just wouldn't generate those, right? And then the publishing, or like the ID token permission, would only be accessible to the publishing one. So for example, with that kind of a workflow, some of the attacks that happened wouldn't be possible when like when some of the repositories were attacked with like all of those like cache poisoning attacks and so on, which perhaps isn't that big of a isn't that big of an issue right now, because from what I understand, like GitHub actually fixed that issue. But you never know what happens, and like how attackers might actually like try to target you. So just like splitting the workflow into more steps with more like granular permissions is definitely an improvement. Mm, yeah, that was one of the bigger features there in V3.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I'll probably give it a try. I think I have been doing it manually, like just doing npm publish from my own and so yeah, worth giving it a try for one of the my packages which I'm using. So as you are close to a 3.0 release, what how people or how the community can help in you in the future or get involved with the project?
I mean, it's always, I feel like there are two things missing in open source. It's both money and time, but I guess like actually time is more valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Although, like with sufficient amount of money, you always you could always just like find the time, or just like drop your regular job to actually work on it. So that kind of solves the time problem. But as long as those are like community projects, I feel like the time is just the biggest constraint. And even with the rise of agents and so on, it's still, I don't know. It still it still requires a lot of time and thought. I feel, and it's easy to throw around some ideas, and like today, it's even like super easy to throw around like PRs, and they will look correct and kind of work for some cases and so on. But like what takes time is like putting an actual effort into designing those features, and like uh, thinking about edge cases, how that fits the project as a whole, and so on. And that's just like something I find most people, at least like in those community driven projects, are not willing to invest as much, because those are involved, like it all depends, like it all depends, of course, but it's much harder to get like the contributors who put that level of care into the project, which is also fair in a sense, like that's not their project. Although my motto is always that like node modules is your code, so there's that. Um, uh, but yeah, so like designing features and helping out with actually implementing them, and be willing to pick up the feedback, and like iterating on that is something that can always help, because I often see like PRs open, and you give them feedback and there's no response, which yeah, is not great, because like you as a maintainer also like put some effort into thinking about the whole thing, and just like even skimming through the code to see, like to do some kind of a preliminary check if it looks all right at all. um And yeah, that problem with the PRs is of course only rising today, because it's just so easy to just like prompt for a PR, and it still like occupies the minds of maintainers.
I mean, yeah. So how are you handling all this AI spams?
Like we don't get as much of that spam right now. Like we're not forced to like close collaboration to contributors or anything like that. And I feel like I'm not going to say that like I won't ever do it, but I don't like that approach.
Mhm.
It's I just like I couldn't count projects that I have contributed to. Like there are just like so many.
Mm.
Because whenever I see an issue, I just want to like fix it, which is a small disease of mine. But yeah, I like fixing stuff. So I just throughout my career opened those issues in just a lot of projects, and it was always like a good experience for me and like good
Mhm.
opportunity to to actually be able to do that. And when I just try to do that and I see like a closed door, like it's like come on, and like and how am I even supposed to handle that, like, and what do I do now? Like, do I open an issue and do I write a prompt there? Do I share a div? Like, do I email you that patch? Like, it's
Yeah.
it's of course not that, but like it feels like I wouldn't like my projects or the project I'm involved with to become like source available. Like that
Mm.
whole idea of being open source and like actually like welcoming contributors to contribute is something I value, because I feel like I also just benefited a lot from that myself. Um, yeah, so far we got some PRs that could maybe be just like rejected, because they wouldn't have to happen. I mean, yeah, like uh, they shouldn't have happened or something. But like
Mhm.
it so far it's not like disastrous for us, so I'm like more than fine with it. And mm, it takes your time a little bit, but
Yeah.
oftentimes it's like you can quickly tell, and you kind of need to pick your battles, and you can't attend every PR anyway at times. So yeah, there's that. So far, when it comes to that, kind of manual investigation is on our hands. We talked about automating that with some of the um, available even like GitHub Actions for that. I think there are some used within the Node community, but yeah, like the problem wasn't that big that we didn't want to commit to it just yet.
Mhm.
But I'll definitely like consider that before closing the ability to actually like create PRs.
I appreciate that because I'm also not a big fan of open source projects closing their door because I also owe my career because I could go ahead and contribute to a project and that changed my career.
Yeah,
And for most of us, right? I mean, for most of us who have been doing open source, this is how we started. Like we found a project, we started contributing, and then there were nice people like who like accepted, or if my PR was bad, like someone told me that don't need to do this, and that's how I am here. But I think yeah, we there are some projects who have given up on people. Let's see like if this thing changes, but yeah, fingers crossed. I will. Let's see what happens in future. But thanks again, Mathios, for sharing the update on Gensets. We'll be looking forward to 3.0 stable release. And before we wrap up, tell us about your work in TypeScript. Like what you have been doing there, and if you have any updates on 7.0.
um Yeah, so I'm just like an external contributor to the project. I, as I mentioned, like I just like fixing stuff. Um, so like that's how I started, kind of like I just got um annoyed at some point by like seeing some random ish behaviors, or just like not being able to actually like explain and reason for like why this works, why this doesn't, and like uh like at times like doing a very small change to your types that can have a sort of a butterfly effect to how it behaves. Mm, for some good reasons, but of course, like as a user, that's like not super apparent. And I was trying to create some more complex type-based machinery in for XState, which is like a state machine library, and we just wanted to leverage the power of inference. So we are just like trying to use all sorts of tricks and just like complex stuff there that wasn't super easy to reason about. And we were just like that guy on the CSS meme, right? Like we're just like trying random stuff, and I just don't like that, which is probably why I never got behind learning CSS. I mean, I couldn't develop that like intuition for it. But like with TypeScript, I could actually like with my JavaScript skills, I could just like debug that. So I went into the compiler and just started digging and digging. So yeah, I learned how that works, at least like a bunch of the stuff there in the checker. And I was facing some smaller issues like in XState or somewhere else that were like very much fixable. Like oftentimes even at the beginning, like one-liners, right?
Mm.
So I just started putting PRs for those. Then, you know, I expanded the scope, started implementing some bigger changes, tried some features as well. Probably something have landed. Uh, like even in the last 6.0, I think that was a good improvement. That and I changed like uh, hmm, the inference rules behind function expressions in like how they contributed to the inference. Because the problem with inference in TypeScript, it's like it has some phases and there are not that many of them, and it just like gathers some inference candidates, then tries to pick up the best one, then it tries to supply that to your like generic signature, and it checks if those parameters actually satisfy that inferred type. And of course there are overloads and some other stuff, but that is like roughly how it works. So it just like gathers. It's like pattern matching algorithm. So it just walks your arguments, and it just tries to pattern match that against the types. And when it sees at that position some reference to a typed variable, it just like pushes to an array, and it gathers like covariant and contravariant inferences into separate arrays, and some different positions have different priorities and so on. But it's kind of a simple system of just like aggregating candidates, and at the end of the pass, it tries to compute based on some extra heuristics and so on, like one candidate out of those. um, mm, and that's it. But uh, so it's not like it won't like revisit some of the decisions, for example, or like very rarely. Because for example, when you have like a callback, and if you have a parameter that is not annotated, it has to pick up some type for it. And once it picks some type for it, it can't revert. Like it's kind of too complex right now. It would require some like speculative speculation and state rewinding and whatnot. So it just makes a pragmatic choice. Once that is assigned, we won't change that. Um, and if you have like overloads and some of the more complex situations, it might just pick not the best one that you would have hoped for, and it might break your type checking at the end. But like the callbacks that don't contain those like annotated parameters are so-called um, non-context sensitive parameters because they are not sensitive to that contextual information from the inference. Um, and for the longest time, there was a surprising issue in TypeScript that it would behave totally differently for when when your callback would have like an arrow function versus a
Mhm.
method, or just like a function expression with a function keyword, you know, instead of an arrow function, even though they both didn't have any annotated parameters. So why this even happened? Well, the function, or a method, can have always kinda has a hidden this parameter that is context sensitive. You don't write it, you can like annotate it, but usually you won't refer to this. So it's very surprising, like by just changing the flavor of your method from the arrow to the function expression, it will just like change behavior. And it was super surprising. There were just like a bunch of issues about that. Uh, so I implemented like just like AST based tracking. So I would just like mark if you would refer to this, and if you wouldn't refer to this, it means, well, it isn't actually context sensitive, right? So we can actually benefit from that whole like non-context sensitive inference, which would just like include those functions like way earlier, so it would just like participate in the whole inference better, in a sense, in a bunch of scenarios, uh, most commonly reported in the issues. And when it comes to the TypeScript point 7, well, I ported a bunch of my work that was still not merged, or like was merged recently. So it wasn't ported at first to TypeScript 7. I investigated a bunch uh, of regressions, and they had um, uh, like the whole rewrite was trying to match the old behavior, right? So they actually have a very comprehensive test suite of baselines, kind of like snapshots, for like types, symbols, and other and errors, of course. So they're just like tracking which still match or which don't. So I just try to pick up as most as I could from those differences, and I try to close the gap. um, and now once 7.0 is already out, um, I have some porting to do. I think like 200 PRs open that got closed when they closed PRs in the old line of TypeScript. So now I need to investigate like which ones are actually worth porting, and which I want to port. And I'll be probably working on that as soon as I just like stabilize change sets, because yeah, I can split.
Okay, thank you for giving those updates. So, yeah, that's it for the day. And thank you everyone for dropping by. But before we wrap up, we actually give a shout out to one of the projects which was covered in the recent edition of Weekly Five. So this week we covered five projects. Which the first one was CIDP, which is a distributed SQL database, and it's open source project, so you can of course go ahead and use it. The next one was Effect TS. So which is pretty popular project by itself. A lot of people are actually using it to. And then third one was Latitude LLM. So in case you want to go ahead and try out like an observability for your AI agents, just go ahead and give it a try. Caprover was another project, which is like a Heroku based pass platform. You can actually self host it and then start publishing your websites. It's like you just buy your own server and you own your own infra. Fermentic UI, which is again an open, it's a fork for a project called Semantic UI, and there's a plan. I mean, I was going through the repo, and there is a plan to actually merge this into Semantic UI at some point of time, not not known when. And then yeah, I will recommend go ahead and try EffectTS. I think that's one of the project which is getting a lot of traction, especially with the agents around. Uh, have you used it, EffectTS, Natish?
FFTS.
Yeah.
Uh, Not really. I mean, I touched it because I also like went on some TypeScript related investigations for them. So yeah, I think it's cool, and perhaps like right now with the agents, it's like just easier to write this stuff. But yeah, like it still I feel like requires at least like some deeper understanding of the core concepts to start with it. So I never got to it. I mean, like we don't use it at work, so and I just didn't have like a lot of time to like dig into it actually like in my free spare time. But it looks like very cool. Like I like the ideas behind it, and the elegance. But I feel it still requires like some deeper expertise to be like super proficient with it. Which yeah, I don't know. Like I still like to look at the code. So and to actually like understand what's happening. Um, and I know it's maybe less popular opinion today,
Mhm.
uh, but I'm that dinosaur still. So so yeah, I would still have to actually like dig deeper into it before actually like committing it to the project on my own, and I just didn't have uh, time to do so.
Same here. I mean, I just like because I'm not like that great as like you mentioned, like you need to be really expert, and I've never been like most like comfortable writing types. I generally reach out to interfaces whenever I have to because I'm a .NET person. Like when I started TypeScript, I was actually transitioning from .NET to TypeScript. So the interfaces was what clicked for me. So I never went deep writing my own types and everything. So it's and then I think effects is more about like understanding the types. So
Yeah,
Ritvik,
yeah, and like some of the errors that you could get from that, it's enigmatic at the very least. I mean, I know they also have like custom LSP plugin and so on, so perhaps that just like nowadays helps with that. But
mhm.
bare errors that you get from such complex code that they are just not great. And again, like agents make it easier today, but still, there is still something to be said about like inherited complexity of the system that you get, even if it's like auto fixable to some degree. Uh,
So yeah, thanks again, Matish. Thanks for joining, and thanks to everyone who joined us in Slack, sorry, YouTube or any other platform. So we will see you next week. Oh no, we are not. We are not doing it next week because I'm on vacation. So I'll be back in first week of August, and we'll be back with the new episodes and new maintainer. So meanwhile, have a great rest of the day and weekend. Bye bye.
right.